The first time Zara Nickels witnessed a sunrise free from the shadow of the Holloway mansion, she felt like she'd been born anew. Holding her threadbare satchel containing everything she owned in the world, a spare dress, a locket from her mother, and $17 saved penny by penny over 4 years, she stood at the edge of Winnemucca, Nevada, her chest tight with a mixture of terror and exhilaration. Nevada Territory, 1876. The morning air carried the scent of sage and dust, promising another scorching summer day. Zara had escaped in the dead of night, walking 12 miles through darkness, every rustle in the brush making her heart skip with fear that Mr. Holloway's men were coming to drag her back. Back to the life she'd endured since she was 15, now nearly 8 years of servitude that had gradually become something worse. The town was just stirring to life as Zara made her way down the main street. Winnemucca wasn't large, a cluster of wooden buildings straddling the newly established Central Pacific Railroad line, but after years of isolation at the Holloway Ranch, it seemed overwhelming. Men in dusty boots nodded at her as they passed. A woman swept the boardwalk outside a general store. The normalcy of it all felt foreign. Zara kept her eyes down, conscious of her appearance, hair hastily pinned, dress worn thin at the elbows, boots scuffed beyond repair. She needed work, and quickly. The $17 wouldn't last long, and Holloway would come looking. He'd made it clear what would happen if she ever tried to leave. "You looking for something, miss?" The voice made her jump. A gray-haired woman stood in the doorway of a building with a sign reading Maeve's Boarding House. "Aye," Zara's voice caught. She rarely spoke to anyone besides the Holloway family and the other servants. "I need work, madam." The woman's eyes narrowed, assessing. "Where'd you come from?" "East," Zara answered vaguely, running from something. When Zara didn't answer, the woman sighed. "Aren't we all?" "I don't have work, but Pearl at the diner might." 2 doors down. Pearl, as it turned out, was a sturdy woman with strong arms and a permanently furrowed brow. She eyed Zara skeptically when she inquired about employment. "Ever waited tables before?" "No, madam, but I'm a quick learner." "I can cook too." "Don't need a cook," Pearl cut her off. "Need someone to serve and clean. Pays $2 a week plus meals. Start now, there's an apron in the back." $2 was far less than Zara had hoped, but it came with food and didn't require references. She tied the apron around her waist with trembling fingers and got to work. By midday, her feet ached and her hands were raw from hot dishes and harsh soap. The diner filled with ranch hands, railroad workers, and townspeople, all demanding coffee and stew and answers to questions Zara didn't know. "Where's the pie?" Pearl promised. "This coffee's colder than a banker's heart." "New girl, huh? Where'd you come from?" She moved between tables, trying to remember orders, flinching when men raised their voices. One cowboy grabbed her wrist as she set down his plate, his fingers digging into her skin. "Haven't seen you around before, pretty thing." Zara froze, memories flooding back. Holloway's eldest son cornering her in the pantry, hands pawing at her skirts. She'd fought then and paid for it with bruises and no dinner for 3 days. "Let her be, Jenkins." The new voice was deep, commanding without being harsh. "The lady's trying to work." The grip on her wrist loosened. Zara stepped back quickly, nearly colliding with the man who had spoken. She looked up and up further at a tall figure silhouetted against the window light. "Sorry about that," he said, and she could make out his features now. Strong jaw darkened with stubble, eyes the color of summer storms, broad shoulders beneath a worn leather vest. He wasn't dressed like the other cowboys, no jangling spurs or flashy bandana. His clothes were practical, dusty from the trail. Some folks forget their manners when they're hungry. "Thank you," Zara managed, her heart still racing. She hurried back to the kitchen, feeling his eyes follow her. Throughout the afternoon, she noticed him watching from his corner table. Not with the predatory gaze she'd grown to recognize and fear, but with curiosity, perhaps even concern. He ate slowly, ordered coffee twice, and left a generous tip when he finally stood to leave. Zara finished her shift exhausted and edgy. Pearl paid her 50 cents for the day's work and told her to return at dawn. With nowhere else to go, she reluctantly approached Maeve's boarding house, where a room cost 25 cents per night, extravagant, but safer than sleeping outdoors with Holloway's men potentially searching for her. Maeve showed her to a tiny attic room with a narrow bed and a cracked wash basin. Bathrooms down the hall, no gentlemen visitors, quiet after 9. Alone, Zara sank onto the bed, finally allowing herself to feel the enormity of what she'd done. Freedom tasted different than she'd imagined, more frightening, more exhausting. She held her mother's locket, the only thing she had left of the woman who died when Zara was 12, leaving her to the mercy of distant relatives who'd eventually sold her labor contract to Holloway. 3 sharp knocks at the door startled her from her thoughts. She approached cautiously. "Who is it, Maeve? Got a gentleman asking after you, says it's important." Panic surged through Zara's veins. Had Holloway found her already? She grabbed her satchel, looking frantically for an escape route. The window was small but might accommodate her slight frame. "Miss, you decent." "He's mighty insistent." "One moment," Zara called, voice trembling. She couldn't run again so soon. Where would she go? The railroad station would be watched. She opened the door a crack. Maeve stood with arms folded across her chest, and behind her the tall man from the diner. "This fella says he has a proposition for you," Maeve said, disapproval evident in her tone. The man touched the brim of his hat respectfully. "Madam, I apologize for disturbing you. Name's Blake Everett. I own the Double Circle Ranch about 10 miles west of town." Zara gripped the doorframe. "What do you want with me, Mr. Everett?" "I'm looking to hire help. My housekeeper left to get married last month, and I need someone to cook and keep the place in order." He shifted his weight, seemingly uncomfortable under her suspicious gaze. "Pays $5 a week with room and board included. $5, more than double Pearl's wage." Still, Zara had learned to distrust generosity from men. "Why me? You don't know me. Saw you working today. You're thorough, quick to learn." And he hesitated. "Seems to me like you could use a fresh start somewhere out of town." Maeve snorted. "That's putting it kindly. Girl came in looking like she'd been chased by wolves." Blake ignored the comment. "It's honest work, Miss Nickels. Zara Nickels, Miss Nickels. My ranch has 6 hands besides myself. 3 meals a day, laundry once a week, general upkeep of the main house. Sundays off. I can bring you back to town if you want, or you're welcome to stay and rest." His eyes, direct and clear, met hers. "You'd have your own cabin, door locks from the inside." The last sentence made Zara's breath catch. He'd read her fear somehow. "I don't know the first thing about ranch work. You know how to cook?" "Yes." "Clean?" "Yes. That's all I need. Rest can be learned." Maeve interjected, "Girl, if you're running from something, 10 miles out of town might be safer than here. Everett's got a decent reputation. Strange as a $3 bill, but decent." Blake shot the older woman a look. "Thank you for that ringing endorsement, Maeve." Zara's mind raced. Working at the diner meant staying in town, visible, easily found. The ranch would put distance between her and Holloway, and $5 a week would build her savings faster, perhaps enough to buy a train ticket further west to California, where a woman might truly disappear. "When would I start?" "Now, if you're willing." Got the wagon outside. It could be a trap, a voice in her head warned. Men didn't offer jobs to unknown women out of kindness. But something in Blake Everett's steady gaze suggested honesty, and she'd learned to read men's intentions in her years at Holloway's. "I'll get my things." 20 minutes later, Zara sat beside Blake on the wagon seat, her satchel at her feet, watching Winnemucca shrink behind them as the horses plodded west into the gathering dusk. Neither spoke for nearly a mile. Finally, Blake cleared his throat. "Don't mean to pry, but it might help me to know what kind of trouble you're avoiding." "Law trouble," Zara stiffened. "No. Husband trouble, I'm not married." He nodded, seemingly relieved. "Good. I mean, not that it would be my business if you were, but legal complications can follow a person." She studied his profile in the fading light. His nose had been broken once, she noticed, but otherwise his features were even, handsome without being delicate. A working man's face. "It's a man named Holloway," she finally said, surprising herself with the admission. "Edwin Holloway. He owns a cattle ranch east of here." Blake's hands tightened on the reins. "I know of him, not well. I worked for his family, contracted labor, indentured." His voice sharpened. "Something like that." Zara wrapped her arms around herself. "My contract ended over a year ago, but Holloway said I owed him for room and board. Then it was for medicine when I took sick. Then for a dress when mine was too worn to be decent. The debt kept growing." Blake was quiet for a long moment. That's not legal. Not much law out here for women like me. Orphans, no family to speak for us. His son's still running wild. The question made her stomach clench. Yes, Blake didn't ask more, but his jaw tightened. They rode in silence as the stars emerged countless and brilliant against the vast Nevada sky. Finally, he pointed ahead to where yellow light spilled from windows in the distance. Double circle. Home sweet home. As they drew closer, Zara could make out a substantial main house of timber and stone, flanked by a bunkhouse, barn, and various outbuildings. A corral held several horses, shadowy shapes moving in the darkness. Dogs barked as the wagon approached, and a man emerged from the bunkhouse, lantern in hand. "That you, Blake, getting worried with night coming on?" "It's me, Sam, brought our new housekeeper." Sam raised his lantern higher, illuminating Zara's face. He was older, maybe 50, with a white beard and kind eyes. "Well, welcome to you, miss. About time we had a woman's touch around here again." Blake helped her down from the wagon, his hand warm and steady under her elbow. "Sam's my foreman." "Known him since I was knee-high to a grasshopper," Sam chuckled. "Taught him everything he knows about cattle, which ain't saying much." Zara attempted a smile, exhaustion suddenly overwhelming her. Blake must have noticed because he quickly took her satchel. "Let's get you settled. You can meet everyone else tomorrow." Her cabin turned out to be a small but sturdy structure about 50 yards from the main house. Inside was a bed, table, chair, and iron stove, all neat and clean. A shelf held books, actual books, a luxury Zara hadn't enjoyed in years. "Bathrooms out back," Blake explained. "Not fancy but private. I had the boys fill the water barrel earlier. Kitchen in the main house is stocked. Feel free to make yourself something if you're hungry." Zara stood in the center of the room, overwhelmed. "This is very generous." "It's what I'd want if I were working for someone else." He set her satchel on the bed. "There's a key for the door on the table. Breakfast is usually at 6, but take tomorrow to get your bearings. We can manage one more day of Sam's cooking." He tipped his hat and turned to leave, then paused in the doorway. "Miss Nickels, if Holloway comes looking, you're under my employment and protection now. Remember that." After he left, Zara sat on the bed, fingering the key. He'd left a small brass object that represented something she hadn't possessed in years: control. She turned it over and over in her palm, marveling at its weight. Sleep came fitfully that night, her body too accustomed to vigilance to fully relax in the strange surroundings. She woke at dawn from habit, washing her face in the basin before exploring her new domain. The cabin was simple but sound, with no leaks in the roof or drafts in the walls, luxuries compared to the servants' quarters at Holloway's. A small mirror hung above the washstand, and Zara caught a glimpse of herself. Thin face, dark circles under gray eyes, brown hair dull from harsh lye soap. She looked older than her 23 years. Outside, the ranch was coming to life. Men moved between buildings, voices carrying in the clear morning air. Horses nickered in the corral. Somewhere, a rooster crowed belatedly. Zara smoothed her dress, one of only 2 she owned, and made her way to the main house. The kitchen was larger than she expected, with a massive iron stove, butcher block table, and well-stocked pantry. Whoever had kept house before had been organized, with clearly labeled containers of flour, sugar, coffee, and beans. A side of bacon hung from a hook, and a basket of eggs sat on the counter. "Make yourself at home." Zara jumped at Blake's voice. He stood in the doorway, already dressed for work in a flannel shirt and denims, hat in hand. "I didn't mean to startle you," he added, keeping his distance. "Just wanted to check if you needed anything." "No, I'm fine, thank you," she gestured around the kitchen. "This is well equipped, Mrs. Finch." The previous housekeeper was particular about her workspace, been a bit neglected since she left. He scratched his jaw. "We've been living on beans and biscuits mostly." "I can do better than that." "I'd hoped so." A smile touched his eyes. "The men are looking forward to a proper meal. Especially Tom, youngest hand, still growing. Eats like he's hollow inside." The casual conversation eased some of Zara's tension. This was familiar territory: cooking, organizing, making a space function. She'd done this at Holloway's, though with far fewer resources and much less appreciation. "Mr. Everett, Blake, please, Blake." The informality felt strange on her tongue. I want to be clear about my duties and expectations, his expression sobered. Cooking, cleaning the main house, laundry once a week. The men handle their own spaces and the barn. Your cabin is yours alone. He met her eyes directly. If that's what you're asking, there are no other expectations. Not from me, not from my men. First sign of disrespect, they answer to me. Relief flooded through her, though caution remained. Men made promises easily, especially when they wanted something. I'll start breakfast then. Blake nodded. I'll send the boys in when it's ready. Cooking for 8 hungry men proved both challenging and unexpectedly satisfying. Zara found her rhythm quickly, preparing eggs, bacon, biscuits, and potatoes in quantities that would have fed the Holloways for 3 days. When the ranch hands filed in, they removed their hats and washed their hands without being told Blake's influence, she suspected. Sam made introductions. Tom, the youngest at barely 20, brothers Hank and Frank Ellis, who bickered constantly, quiet Miguel, who spoke little English but smiled warmly, and Cooper, a former Buffalo soldier who kept the books and helped with the horses. They ate ravenously, complimenting her cooking between mouthfuls. "Madam, these biscuits are a miracle," Tom declared, reaching for his fourth. "Leave some for the rest of us," Hank grumbled, though his own plate was heaped high. Blake ate more moderately, watching the interactions with quiet amusement. When Zara refilled his coffee, he thanked her but gestured for her to sit. "Join us. There's plenty." She hesitated, unused to eating with employers, but the men shifted to make room. Slowly, she filled a small plate and took a seat. "Miss Nickels came from back east," Blake said, a statement rather than a question. "She's not used to our ways yet." Zara gave him a grateful look for not revealing her actual circumstances. "East, huh?" Frank buttered another biscuit. "What brings you all the way out here?" "Opportunity," she answered carefully. Cooper nodded approvingly. "Same as all of us. West is still the place for second chances." "Or first chances," Miguel added in accented English. Blake steered the conversation to the day's work, moving cattle to the north pasture, repairing fencing, breaking new horses. Zara listened, trying to understand the rhythms of ranch life, so different from the rigid household she'd left. After breakfast, the men dispersed to their tasks, leaving Zara to clean up. Blake lingered, helping carry dishes to the washbasin despite her protests. "Not necessary," she insisted. "This is my job. My mother raised me to clean my own messes," he replied. "Besides, wanted to show you something." He led her to a small room off the kitchen, lined with shelves of preserves, dried goods, and household supplies. "Pantry's well stocked for now. Make a list of anything you need and I'll bring it from town next trip." He pointed to a ledger on one shelf. "Mrs. Finch kept records here, what was used, what needs replacing, helps with budgeting." Zara opened the ledger, impressed by the meticulous records. She was very organized. 20 years as a housekeeper before she married the blacksmith, left big shoes to fill. He paused, studying her. "But I think you'll do fine. I'll try not to disappoint." "Wasn't a test, Miss Nickels, just an observation." He moved toward the door. "I'll be out with the herd today. Sam knows where to find me if you need anything." Left alone, Zara explored the rest of the house. Besides the kitchen and pantry, there was a comfortable sitting room with a stone fireplace, a dining room with a large oak table, Blake's office with maps and ledgers neatly arranged, and upstairs, 3 bedrooms. The master bedroom was clearly Blake's, sparse but tidy, with a bookshelf full of volumes on cattle breeding, Nevada history, and surprisingly, poetry. The other rooms were furnished but unoccupied. Zara spent the day cleaning, though the house was already in decent order. She changed linens, dusted surfaces, and swept floors, finding comfort in the familiar routine. At noon, she rang the dinner bell as instructed, and the men came in for a meal of stew and fresh bread. By evening, she'd prepared a supper of roast beef and vegetables that had the Cowboys singing her praises. "Miss Nickels, if you cook like this every day, we'll all be too fat to ride," Hank declared, patting his stomach. "Speak for yourself," Tom said around a mouthful of potato. "I'm still growing." "Like a weed," Cooper agreed with a laugh. Blake ate quietly, occasionally joining the banter but mostly observing. When the meal ended, the men cleared their own plates without prompting and thanked her before heading to the bunkhouse. "They're good men," Blake said when they were alone. Rough around the edges but decent. They seem to respect you. I hope I've earned it. He helped her cover the leftover food. My father ran this ranch with an iron fist. Men came and went like tumbleweeds. When I took over 5 years ago, I decided to try a different approach. Partnership instead of servitude, Zara murmured, then flushed when she realized she'd spoken aloud. Blake looked at her sharply. Exactly that. Everyone here has a stake in the ranch's success. They get fair wages, plus a small percentage of profits at year's end. That's unusual. Maybe, but I sleep better. He wiped his hands on a towel. And I keep good men instead of constantly training new ones. As days turned into weeks, Zara settled into life at Double Circle Ranch. The predictable routine was soothing breakfast at dawn, midday dinner, evening supper with cleaning and baking in between. No one shouted at her for minor mistakes. No one entered her cabin without knocking. No one's hands wandered where they shouldn't. Blake kept his distance, always polite but never intrusive. He often ate breakfast before the others, heading out to check the herd at first light. Sometimes she'd see him return late, silhouetted against the sunset as he unsaddled his horse. Occasionally, he joined her in the kitchen while she baked, sitting at the table with coffee and ranch accounts, comfortable silence between them. "You're settling in well," he observed one evening in late July, nearly a month after her arrival. "The men have stopped complaining about Mrs. Finch leaving." Zara smiled as she kneaded bread dough. "High praise indeed. Highest compliment cowboys can give comparing you favorably to a woman they once thought irreplaceable." A sudden knock at the door interrupted them. Sam entered, looking troubled. "Blake, Holloway's boy, is in town asking questions. Cooper just rode in from Winnemucca with the news." The name sent ice through Zara's veins. The dough forgotten, she gripped the table for support. Blake was on his feet immediately. "Which boy?" "The eldest. Jared." Zara's breath came fast and shallow. Jared Holloway had been the worst of them, cruel, entitled, persistent in his pursuit despite her refusals. "What kind of questions?" Blake asked, his voice carefully controlled. "Asking after a young woman matching Miss Nickels' description. Offering rewards for information. Says she stole family property." Zara found her voice. "I didn't steal anything." "I know," Blake said with such certainty that she nearly wept with relief. He turned to Sam. "Who knows she's here? Just our men. But Blake, Holloway's got connections. Sheriff owes him favors. Then we need to be prepared." Blake's eyes met Zara's. "Do you want to leave? I can arrange passage further west. California, maybe." The offer stunned her. He would help her escape rather than turn her over or insist she stay. It confirmed what she'd begun to suspect. Blake Everett was a different kind of man than she'd known before. I don't want to bring trouble to your door. Trouble's already at the door. Question is how we face it." Sam cleared his throat. "Could marry her." Both Zara and Blake stared at him. "Just saying," Sam continued, unfazed. "Law's different for married women. Holloway couldn't claim she was still under contract if she was a wife instead. Even if he did, he'd have to deal with you, not her directly." Blake looked uncomfortable. "That's a rather extreme solution, Sam." "Sometimes extreme problems need extreme solutions." Zara's mind raced. Marriage had never been in her plans after Holloway's. She'd vowed never to put herself under a man's control again. But Sam wasn't entirely wrong. A married woman had legal protections a single woman didn't. "It wouldn't have to be real," she said quietly. "Just on paper, for protection." Blake's eyes widened. "You can't be serious." "I am, if it would solve the legal problem." She swallowed hard. "Unless you find the idea objectionable, it's not that." Blake ran a hand through his hair, agitated. "Marriage isn't something to enter into lightly, even as a ruse." Sam chuckled. "Son, you're 32 years old with no prospects in sight. This might be your only chance." "Not helping, Sam," Blake growled. Zara felt her face burning with humiliation. Of course he wouldn't want to tie himself to her, even temporarily. What had she been thinking? "Forget I suggested it," she said stiffly. "Perhaps I should leave after all." "No." Blake's response was immediate. "That's not what he sighed heavily. "Sam, give us a minute." When the foreman had gone, Blake paced the length of the kitchen. "You don't know what you're suggesting. Marriage, even in name only, means you'd be legally bound to me. Your property would become mine. You'd need my permission for legal matters." "I don't have any property," Zara pointed out. And it would only be until Holloway gives up or we find another solution. And what then? Divorce is complicated, expensive, and rare out here. Then we'd remain married on paper but live as we do now. She returned to kneading the bread dough, needing something to occupy her hands. Nothing would have to change. Blake stopped pacing to look at her directly. Everything would change, Zara. It was the first time he'd used her given name without the formal miss, and something in his tone made her meet his eyes. What she saw there startled her conflict, concern, and something deeper she couldn't name. "I'm not asking for anything from you," she said softly. "Just legal protection. And I want to give you that, but not at the cost of your future choices." He leaned against the counter. "What if you meet someone you truly wish to marry?" The idea seemed so improbable that Zara nearly laughed. "After what I've experienced, that's unlikely. Don't say that." His voice was gentle. "You're young, beautiful, kind-hearted. Any man would be fortunate to win your affection." The unexpected compliment left her speechless. She'd never thought of herself in such terms. At Holloway's, she'd been property, not a woman to be admired or courted. "What if we tried a different approach first?" Blake suggested. "I have friends in the territorial legislature. They might help clarify your legal status without marriage. And if that fails, then..." He took a deep breath. "Then we'll reconsider Sam's suggestion. But not as a last resort or mere convenience." His eyes held hers. "If I ever marry, even in name only, I'd want my wife to enter the arrangement with something more than desperation." Zara nodded, a strange mixture of relief and disappointment washing over her. "Thank you for your honesty. In the meantime, we'll be vigilant. The men are loyal, they won't reveal your presence here. And I'll speak with Sheriff Taylor next time I'm in town. He may owe Holloway favors, but he owes me too." That night, Zara lay awake in her cabin, replaying the conversation. Blake's reaction had surprised her, not outright rejection, but concern for her autonomy and future. No man had ever considered her wishes so carefully before. She couldn't deny that something had changed between them in recent weeks. She'd caught him watching her sometimes with an expression she couldn't decipher, and she found herself seeking his company, enjoying his quiet presence in the kitchen or on the porch at dusk. But romantic feelings. She'd guarded her heart too carefully for too long. And Blake, despite his kindness, had never indicated interest beyond employer and employee. His hesitation about the marriage ruse confirmed that. The next morning brought a letter from town, delivered by a neighboring rancher. Blake read it at breakfast, his expression darkening. "Holloway's filed a formal complaint," he announced to the table. "Claims Zara stole $50 in jewelry before running away." "That's a lie," Zara protested. "I never took anything that wasn't mine. We know that." Blake folded the letter carefully. "But Sheriff Taylor is requesting I bring you to town for questioning." The men exchanged glances. Cooper spoke first. "You're not going to do it, are you, boss?" "Of course not." Blake's tone left no room for argument. "But we need to respond somehow, can't just ignore the law." "I could go," Zara offered quietly. "Explain my situation." "No," several voices answered at once. Blake shook his head firmly. "Holloway will be waiting. Once you're in town, it would be too easy for his men to grab you, law or no law. Then what? I'm going to town myself." "Speak with Taylor, maybe arrange for him to come out here instead. In neutral territory with witnesses, Holloway will have a harder time enforcing his claims." Tom, who rarely spoke at meals, cleared his throat. "Miss Nickels could marry one of us instead, if that would help." The suggestion hung in the air. Frank snorted coffee through his nose. Hank elbowed his brother sharply. Miguel suddenly became very interested in his eggs. "That's very gallant, Tom," Blake said with forced neutrality. "But let's explore legal options first." Zara couldn't help noticing the tension in his jaw as he spoke. Later that morning, she found Blake saddling his horse for the ride to Winnemucca. She approached hesitantly, shielding her eyes from the sun. "Be careful," she said. "Holloway doesn't like being challenged. Neither do I." He tightened the cinch with practiced efficiency. "Lock your door while I'm gone. Don't leave the ranch property. Blake." She hesitated, then pressed on. "If this doesn't work, if the sheriff insists I come to town, I will. I won't put you and your men at risk." He turned to face her fully, one hand on his saddle. "Zara, do you understand what Holloway might do if he gets his hands on you again?" The question was gentle but direct. She nodded, unable to speak. Then understand this, I won't let that happen. His voice dropped. Not while I have breath in my body. The fierce protectiveness in his words stunned her. Before she could respond, he swung into the saddle. I'll be back by nightfall. Any trouble, fire 3 shots in the air. The men will come running. She watched him ride away, a curious ache in her chest. No one had ever stood between her and danger before. She'd always faced threats alone. The day crawled by with excruciating slowness. Zara threw herself into baking, preparing an elaborate supper to keep her hands and mind occupied. The men went about their work but kept their rifles closer than usual. Sam positioned himself on the porch much of the afternoon, whittling wood but clearly watching the approach to the ranch. Dusk fell with no sign of Blake. Supper came and went. The men ate quickly and returned to their vigilant posts. By full dark, Zara's nerves were stretched to breaking point. Should have been back by now, Sam muttered, peering into the darkness. Unless he decided to stay in town. Blake wouldn't stay without sending word, Cooper countered. A twig snapped in the darkness. Instantly, Sam's rifle was in his hands. Who's there? It's me, came Blake's voice, followed by the sound of a weary horse. Stand down. He emerged from the shadows, dismounting stiffly. Even in the dim light from the porch lanterns, Zara could see blood on his shirt. What happened? She gasped, rushing forward. Had a disagreement with Jared Holloway. Blake handed his reins to Tom. Take care of Scout, would you? He's had a long day. Inside, under the kitchen lamplight, the damage was clearer: a split lip, bruised jaw, and a cut above his eye that had bled freely onto his collar. Sit, Zara commanded, filling a basin with water. The men gathered around as she cleaned Blake's wounds with gentle hands. Tell us what happened. Met with Sheriff Taylor. He was sympathetic but said he had to investigate Holloway's claims. Blake winced as she dabbed at the cut. Suggested I bring you in tomorrow for questioning. And the injuries, Sam pressed, ran into Jared and 2 of his father's men outside the saloon. Blake's mouth twisted in a grim smile. They suggested I mind my own business. I suggested they were my business. Disagreement ensued. 3 against 1, Cooper shook his head. That's Holloway's style. 2, actually. Sheriff broke it up before the 3rd could join in. Blake caught Zara's hand as she cleaned his lip. I'm fine, truly. His fingers were warm around hers. She pulled away reluctantly. This is my fault. No, it's Holloway's fault for thinking he owns people. Blake accepted the whiskey Sam offered, taking a long swallow, but we have a problem. Sheriff's coming tomorrow midday. What will we tell him? Frank asked. The truth. Blake looked at Zara. If you're willing to speak about your time at Holloway's. She nodded, though the thought of reliving those years made her stomach clench. I will. Good. Taylor's a reasonable man. And I have evidence that might help. He reached into his pocket, producing a folded document. Stopped by the county clerk's office. Found your original labor contract. Zara stared at the paper. How? Contracts have to be registered to be legally binding. Yours was filed 6 years ago, signed by your uncle and Holloway. He unfolded it carefully. 3-year term ending in 1873, so she's been free for 3 years, Sam said. Holloway had no right to keep her. Exactly, and no claim to unpaid debts, he supposedly added afterward. Those would require a new contract. Hope flickered in Zara's chest. Will that be enough? It should be, combined with your testimony. Blake hesitated. But Holloway has influence, and his son was making threats before our altercation. What kind of threats? Zara asked, dread building. Blake exchanged glances with Sam before answering. He said if the law wouldn't return what belonged to his father, they'd take matters into their own hands. They're coming here, she realized, aren't they? Possibly, which is why we'll be ready. Blake stood, grimacing slightly. Double watches tonight, Sam, everyone armed, already arranged, boss. The men dispersed to their posts, leaving Zara alone with Blake. She put away the medical supplies with shaking hands. You should rest, she told him. Those bruises will feel worse tomorrow. I've had worse. That doesn't make me feel better. A small smile touched his lips, then winced away. You're worried about me, that's nice. Of course I'm worried. You got hurt because of me. No, Zara, I got hurt because Jared Holloway is a bully who's never been told no. Blake moved closer, his voice softening. But it was worth it to see his face when I showed him the contract. He didn't know his father had registered it. He'll be furious. Good, angry men make mistakes. Blake touched her arm lightly. Get some sleep. Tomorrow will be challenging enough without exhaustion. I don't think I can sleep. Try for me. His eyes held hers for a long moment. I need you clear-headed tomorrow. She nodded, though sleep seemed impossible. As she turned to leave, Blake spoke again. Zara. No matter what happens with the sheriff, no one is taking you away from here against your will. I promise you that. The conviction in his voice followed her back to her cabin, where she lay awake long into the night, listening to the sounds of men moving quietly around the property, keeping watch. Morning came with an eerie stillness. The men ate breakfast quickly, eyes constantly moving to windows and doors. Blake looked worse than the night before, his bruises darkened to purple, but moved with determined energy as he organized the ranch's defense. By 11, they were as ready as they could be. Rifles cleaned and loaded, horses saddled, lookouts posted. Sheriff will likely come from the east, Blake explained, but Holloway might approach from any direction if he's planning something. Cooper, you and Miguel watch the north ridge. Frank and Hank the south pasture. Tom stays with Zara at all times. Young Tom straightened at the responsibility, checking his pistol with newfound gravity. What about you? Zara asked. Sam and I will meet the sheriff. Blake adjusted his gun belt. Best if we appear normal. Just a ranch preparing for visitors. At 12:30, Cooper signaled from his lookout position. Riders approaching, 4 men coming fast from the east. Blake joined him, peering through a spyglass. Sheriff Taylor, Jared Holloway, and 2 others. His expression hardened. Armed more heavily than a social call requires. What do we do, boss? Tom asked, positioning himself closer to Zara. Stay calm, let me do the talking. Blake handed the spyglass to Sam, but be ready. The riders entered the yard in a cloud of dust, horses lathered from hard riding. Sheriff Taylor dismounted first, a stout man with a graying mustache and weary eyes. Jared Holloway followed, his handsome face marred by the same bruising as Blake's. The 2 men with him remained mounted, hands resting too casually near their holstered weapons. Everett, the sheriff nodded. Appreciate you receiving us on short notice. Always welcome, Sheriff. Blake's posture was relaxed, but Zara noticed he'd positioned himself strategically back to the house, clear view of all riders. Though I'll admit surprise at your choice of company. Jared Holloway spat in the dirt. Where is she, Everett? We know you're hiding her. I'm not hiding anyone, Holloway. Miss Nickels is employed here, legally. Sheriff Taylor sighed heavily. That's what we need to determine, Blake. Mr. Holloway has filed a formal complaint of theft and breach of contract. And I have documentation proving the contract ended 3 years ago. Blake's voice remained cordial. As for theft, that's a serious accusation requiring evidence. My father's word is evidence enough, Jared snapped. That ungrateful, careful, Blake cut him off. You're on my property. The sheriff raised a hand placatingly. Let's all keep our heads. I just need to speak with Miss Nickels and see this documentation you mentioned, Blake. Of course. Blake turned slightly. Miss Nickels, would you join us, please? Zara stepped forward, Tom a half step behind her. She kept her chin up, refusing to cower before Jared Holloway, though her heart hammered in her chest. Sheriff Taylor, she greeted the lawman with as much composure as she could muster. Miss Nickels. The sheriff touched his hat respectfully. I understand there's some dispute about your employment situation. No dispute, Sheriff. My contract with Mr. Holloway ended in 1873, as the document shows. She gestured to the paper Blake now held extended, Jared's face flushed with anger. She's lying. Father extended that contract. Did he now? Blake asked mildly. Strange that no amended contract was filed with the county. The sheriff examined the document, frowning. This appears legitimate. 3-year term clearly ended. He looked at Jared. Your father would need a new signed agreement to extend it legally. She agreed verbally, and she still owes for room and board. I worked for every penny, Zara countered, finding her courage. And when I tried to leave after my contract ended, I was locked in my room. Threatened, told I would never leave the Holloway property. Jared took a menacing step forward. You little, that's far enough, Blake warned, hand dropping to his side where his pistol rested. The tension in the yard crackled like lightning before a storm. The 2 mounted men shifted, hands now openly on their weapons. Around the property, Zara knew Blake's men were watching, rifles ready. Sheriff Taylor looked increasingly uncomfortable. Miss Nickels, did you take anything from the Holloway Ranch that wasn't yours? Money, jewelry? Be honest now. No, sir. I took only my personal belongings and the wages I'd saved. $17 total. She's lying, Jared insisted. Father kept a gold watch in his desk on the day she left. A convenient claim, Blake observed, easily made, difficult to disprove. The sheriff rubbed his mustache thoughtfully. Without evidence either way, it's one word against another, he sighed. Based on this contract, Miss Nickels was legally free to leave Holloway's employment. As for the alleged theft, unless you have witnesses or proof, Jared, I can't act on the accusation. Jared's face contorted with rage. You're taking their side, after everything my father's done for this county. I'm following the law, son, nothing more. The hell you are. Jared turned to his companions. Jenkins, Riley, Getter. Everything happened at once. The mounted men reached for their guns. Blake drew faster, his pistol aimed squarely at Jared. Sam's rifle appeared as if by magic, trained on Jenkins. From the roof of the barn, Cooper's voice rang out. I've got Riley in my sights, boss. Sheriff Taylor fumbled for his own weapon. Everyone stand down, Jared, halfway to drawing his pistol, froze. His eyes darted from Blake to the various ranch hands now visible with weapons ready. You're outnumbered, outgunned, and breaking the law on my property, Blake said quietly. Think carefully about your next move, Holloway. For a terrifying moment, Zara thought Jared would draw anyway. Violence simmered in his eyes, the same look he'd had on the night he'd cornered her in the Holloway kitchen, hands pawing at her clothes until she'd struck him with a cast iron skillet and run. This isn't over, Jared finally snarled, slowly raising his hands. Father won't stand for this. Your father doesn't own the law, Blake replied, and he certainly doesn't own Miss Nickels. Sheriff Taylor, visibly relieved that bloodshed had been averted, stepped between them. I'm concluding there's no case to answer here. Miss Nickels was legally free to leave her employment and denies the theft. Without evidence, that's the end of it. He turned to Jared. We're leaving Holloway. Now, Sheriff, now, Jared, don't make this worse. Jared's gaze found Zara, hatred burning in his eyes. You'll regret this. Both of you? The only thing I regret, Zara said clearly, is not leaving Holloway Ranch sooner. The standoff broke when Jared finally turned away, mounting his horse with angry movements. The sheriff followed, then the two hired men, all under the watchful eyes of Blake's ranch hands. I'll escort them to the county line, Sheriff Taylor assured Blake. Make sure there's no doubling back, but Everett, watch yourself. Edwin Holloway isn't a man who forgets slights. Neither am I, Blake replied. Safe travels, Sheriff. They watched the riders disappear back the way they had come, dust settling in their wake. Only when they were out of sight did the tension in the yard dissolve. Men lowered weapons, exchanged relieved glances. Well, that could have gone worse, Sam observed dryly. Blake holstered his pistol. Could have gone better too. He turned to Zara, concern evident in his eyes. Are you all right? She realized she was trembling, reaction setting in now that the danger had passed. I think so, just overwhelmed. You did well, stood your ground. There was unmistakable pride in his voice. But this isn't over. Jared Holloway isn't known for accepting defeat gracefully. What happens now? Blake considered the question. We remain vigilant, double watches continue for a while, and, he hesitated, glancing at Sam, maybe we should reconsider our earlier discussion. It took Zara a moment to understand his meaning. The marriage, as a legal protection, yes. After today, it's clear Holloway won't give up easily. As my wife, your legal standing would be stronger. Sam nodded approvingly. Been saying that all along. Not helping, Sam, Blake said, but without his earlier irritation. Zara studied Blake's face, searching for signs of reluctance or obligation. She found only steady resolve and something softer, almost hopeful. Would it just be on paper? She asked quietly. As we discussed before. Blake took a breath. That would be entirely up to you. I wouldn't expect anything, but I'd offer partnership in every sense that matters this ranch, its operations, its future, your future. Partnership. The word echoed in Zara's mind, so different from servitude. So different from anything she'd known. I need time to think, she said finally. Of course. Blake's expression remained carefully neutral. Take all the time you need. That evening, after the excitement had faded and the ranch settled back into its routines, Zara walked to the edge of the property where a small creek created a natural boundary. The setting sun painted the landscape in gold and crimson, cottonwood leaves shimmering in the gentle breeze. She heard footsteps behind her but didn't turn, recognizing Blake's measured tread. Thought I might find you here, he said, stopping a respectful distance away. You missed supper. Wasn't hungry. Sam saved you a plate, she smiled faintly. He's a good man, the best. Blake moved to stand beside her, watching the sunset reflect on the water. Did I overstep earlier, suggesting the marriage again? No, Zara wrapped her arms around herself against the cooling air. I'm just trying to understand what it would mean for both of us. What concerns you most? She considered the question carefully. That you'd come to resent the obligation, that I'd be trading one form of servitude for another, kinder version. Blake was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was low and earnest. I've lived alone for 5 years since my father died. Never thought much about marriage until recently. Too busy with the ranch, I told myself. He shifted to face her. But the truth is, I was waiting for something I couldn't name until you arrived. Zara's breath caught. Blake, let me finish, please. This isn't about obligation or protection, though I'd offer both gladly. It's about waking up each morning looking forward to coffee in the kitchen because you'll be there. It's about watching you with the men kind but never weak, earning their respect through actions not demands. It's about finding myself riding home faster at day's end, eager to return. Tears pricked at Zara's eyes, unexpected and unwelcome. You can't mean that. I've never meant anything more. Blake gently turned her to face him. I'm not asking you to love me, Zara. I'm asking you to consider that you might someday, and until then, or even if that day never comes, I'm offering partnership in every sense of the word. I don't know how to be a wife, she whispered. I only know how to serve. Then we'll learn together what partnership means. His hand reached for hers, tentative, giving her every chance to pull away. No masters, no servants, just two people building something meaningful side by side. She looked down at their joined hands, hers pale and small, his tanned and calloused from years of honest work. So different from Holloway's soft, grasping fingers that had taken and taken without giving in return. If I say yes, she began slowly, I want it to be a real marriage, not just on paper. Hope brightened his eyes. Are you certain? No, she admitted with a small laugh. I'm terrified. But I think, she squeezed his hand, I think I'd regret saying no more than I'd regret saying yes. Blake's smile transformed his face, softening the lines of worry that had been present since she'd known him. Zara Nickels, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Not because you need protection or because I need a housekeeper, but because I believe we could build something beautiful together. Yes, she whispered, and was surprised by the lightness that followed the word, as if she'd set down a burden she'd carried for years. Yes, I will. He raised her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. It was the first time he had touched her with anything beyond practical necessity, and the tenderness of it made her heart constrict. We'll go to town tomorrow, he said. Find the justice of the peace. So soon. If you want to wait, no, Zara interrupted. Tomorrow is perfect. They walked back to the ranch together, hands still linked. When they reached the yard, Sam emerged from the bunkhouse, eyebrows raised in silent question. Blake answered with a nod. We're riding to town tomorrow, Sam. Wedding's on. The older man's face split in a wide grin. About time. He turned to call into the bunkhouse. Boys, boss is getting hitched. A chorus of whoops and hollers erupted as the ranch hands poured outside, surrounding them with congratulations and good-natured teasing. Tom blushed bright red when he shook Zara's hand. Cooper promised to play his harmonica at the celebration. Frank and Hank immediately began arguing over who would give the first toast. In the midst of the commotion, Blake leaned close to Zara's ear. Having second thoughts yet. She looked around at these men who had become her protectors, her friends, then back to Blake, whose eyes held nothing but warmth and promise. Not a single one, she answered truthfully. The following morning dawned clear and bright. Zara woke early, examining her two worn dresses with critical eyes. Neither seemed appropriate for a wedding, even a simple one before a justice of the peace. A knock at her cabin door interrupted her deliberation. She opened it to find Maeve from the boarding house standing there, a wrapped package in her arms. "Blake sent word," the older woman explained without preamble. "Said you might need this." Inside the package was a dress of deep blue wool, simple but well made, with lace at the collar and cuffs. "Not new, but carefully cleaned and pressed. It was my daughter's," Maeve explained. "Before she moved to San Francisco, should fit you well enough." "It's beautiful," Zara breathed, holding it against herself, "but I can't consider it a wedding gift." Maeve's stern expression softened slightly. "Everett's a good man, stubborn as a mule but good-hearted. You could do worse." "Yes," Zara agreed with a smile, "much worse." Maeve helped her dress and arranged her hair, revealing unexpected talent with pins and combs. "Had 6 daughters," she explained. "Got plenty of practice." When Zara emerged from the cabin, the ranch yard had been transformed. Someone had swept it clean and strung paper lanterns between the buildings. A table covered with a white cloth held food and a small cake. The men stood awkwardly in their best clothes, hair slicked down with water, faces shining from vigorous washing. Blake waited by the wagon, similarly transformed. Gone were the dusty work clothes, replaced by a dark suit and crisp white shirt. He'd trimmed his beard and combed his hair, though it still curled stubbornly at his collar. When he saw her, he went completely still, his expression one of wonder. "You look beautiful," he said simply when she reached him. "So do you." She touched the lapel of his suit shyly. "I didn't know you owned such fine clothes. Only wear them for funerals and weddings." His smile was crooked. "Prefer the latter." The ride to Winnemucca was filled with nervous anticipation. They spoke little, but Blake kept glancing at her as if to reassure himself she was really there, really agreeing to this unlikely union. The justice of the peace, a balding man named Horace Wilkins, seemed unsurprised by their arrival. "Sheriff Taylor mentioned you might be coming," he explained. "Got the paperwork ready." The ceremony itself was brief, the words ancient and solemn in the dusty office. Zara repeated her vows in a clear voice, surprising herself with her steadiness. Blake's hands were warm around hers as he promised to love, honor, and cherish. When Wilkins pronounced them husband and wife, Blake hesitated only a moment before leaning down to kiss her a gentle, questioning touch that ended too quickly. "Congratulations, Mrs. Everett," he whispered against her lips. The name, her new name, sent a thrill through her. Not Nickels, the name that had followed her through years of servitude. Not Holloway, the name she'd feared would claim her. Everett, Blake's name, freely given and accepted. They signed the marriage certificate with Wilkins and Sheriff Taylor as witnesses. The sheriff shook Blake's hand with genuine warmth. "Glad to see you settling down," he told Blake, then turned to Zara with a bow. "Madam, my congratulations, and my assurance that your legal status is now quite clear. You're under your husband's protection in every way that matters." "Thank you, Sheriff." She hesitated, then asked, "Has there been any word from the Holloways?" Taylor's expression darkened. "Edwin Holloway arrived in town yesterday, raising Cain about his son's reception at your ranch. But when I showed him the original contract and explained the marriage, he seemed to deflate somewhat." A small smile touched the sheriff's lips. "Man knows when he's beaten, even if his son doesn't." Relief washed over Zara. "So it's over." "I believe so, madam. Though I'd stay vigilant for a while yet." The celebration back at the ranch lasted well into the evening. Sam gave a speech that made Blake flush and the men cheer. Cooper played his harmonica while Frank and Hank attempted to teach Miguel traditional American dancing. Tom shyly presented Zara with a wooden carving of a horse he'd made himself. As night fell, the party continued around the bonfire, but Blake took Zara's hand and led her quietly away from the revelry. "I have something to show you," he explained, guiding her not toward her cabin, but to the main house. Inside, he led her upstairs to the master bedroom, his bedroom which had been transformed. Fresh linens on the bed, wildflowers in a jar on the dresser, a new quilt in shades of blue and green. "The men helped," he explained, suddenly looking uncertain. "If you'd prefer your cabin for now," Zara silenced him by rising on tiptoe to kiss him, her hands resting lightly on his shoulders. It was the first time she had initiated such contact, and his surprise quickly gave way to response, his arms encircling her waist with careful restraint. When they parted, both breathing faster, Zara smiled. "I think this will do nicely, husband." The word delighted him. "Say that again." "Husband," she obliged, feeling bold and shy all at once. "My husband." Blake's forehead rested against hers. "I want to be a good one, Zara. I want to be worthy of your trust. You already are." She took a deep breath. "Blake, there's something I should tell you." "About Holloway's son. You don't have to, I want to, before we truly begin our marriage." She stepped back slightly, needing space for this confession. "Jared tried to force himself on me more than once. The last time I fought back hit him with a skillet. That's why I ran when I did." "I knew what would happen when he told his father." Blake's expression darkened with anger, but his voice remained gentle. "Did he?" "No, I stopped him each time, but—" She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold. "I wanted you to know, in case it matters, in case I'm not." "What you expected, Zara." Blake's hands covered hers, warm and steady. "The only thing that matters is that you're safe now, and if you need time, if you want to wait before I don't want to wait." The certainty in her voice surprised them both. "I don't want Holloway or his son to have any power over us. Not anymore." Blake's eyes searched hers, finding the truth there. Slowly, giving her every chance to step away, he lowered his lips to hers again. This time the kiss deepened, revealing a hunger that had been carefully banked until now. Zara responded with her own awakening desire, her hands moving to the buttons of his shirt with newfound boldness. That night, in the room that was now theirs, Blake Everett showed his wife what it meant to be cherished rather than possessed. With infinite patience, he transformed her understanding of physical intimacy from something to be feared into something miraculous. And when they lay tangled together afterward, Zara realized that for the first time in her adult life, she felt truly, completely safe. "What are you thinking?" Blake asked, his fingers trailing lazily along her bare shoulder. "That this is what freedom feels like," she answered honestly. "Not just being away from Holloway, but being here, with you, by choice." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Every day will be your choice, Zara, every day for the rest of our lives." The months that followed brought a gentle transformation to Double Circle Ranch. The main house, once merely functional, became a home under Zara's care. Curtains appeared at windows, books accumulated on shelves, flowers found their way into jars and vases. Blake expanded the garden, building a proper fence to keep rabbits out while Zara planted vegetables and herbs. Their marriage, begun as a practical solution, deepened into something neither had dared hope for. Blake discovered in Zara an unexpected partner in ranch decisions, her keen mind and careful observations proving valuable as they planned for the future. Zara found in Blake the rarest of men, one who valued her thoughts as much as her domestic skills, who sought her opinion and actually listened. And in the privacy of their bedroom, they discovered in each other a passion that grew rather than diminished with familiarity. News came occasionally from town. Edwin Holloway suffered financial setbacks when several ranch hands quit after hearing about Zara's treatment. Jared Holloway left Nevada entirely, heading to California after one too many embarrassing incidents in Winnemucca's saloons. The sheriff reported these developments with thinly veiled satisfaction during his occasional visits to Double Circle. In the spring of 1877, when wildflowers carpeted the hills surrounding the ranch, Zara shared news of her own with Blake. They sat on the porch after supper, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink. "I think," she said carefully, her hand resting on her still flat stomach, "we may need to prepare the small bedroom down the hall." Blake's coffee cup froze halfway to his lips. "Are you certain? Dr. Jenkins confirmed it yesterday when I was in town." She watched his face anxiously. "Are you pleased?" His answer came not in words, but in action, setting aside his cup to kneel before her chair, his hands cradling her face with reverence before sliding down to rest protectively over her abdomen. "A baby," he whispered, wonder in his voice. "Our baby." Tears pricked at Zara's eyes. "I was afraid it might be too soon. We've only been married 8 months. It's perfect timing." Blake's smile was radiant. "Absolutely perfect." Word spread quickly among the ranch hands. Sam immediately began carving a cradle from cottonwood. Cooper offered to build a rocking chair for the nursery. Tom, now more confident after a year at Double Circle, promised to teach the child to ride as soon as they're big enough to sit a saddle. That won't be for some years yet, Zara laughed. Worth waiting for, Miss Zara, the young man replied seriously. As her body changed with the advancing pregnancy, Zara found herself reflecting on the extraordinary journey that had brought her to this place. From the desperate woman who had fled Holloway's ranch with nothing but a satchel and determination, to mistress of Double Circle, beloved wife, and soon-to-be mother. The transformation seemed miraculous. Blake proved himself an attentive, if occasionally overprotective, husband during her pregnancy. He hired a girl from town to help with the heavier household tasks, despite Zara's protests that she was perfectly capable. "Humor me," he'd say, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Let me take care of you for once." Their son arrived on a crisp October morning after a difficult labor that left Blake pacing the porch for hours, wearing a path in the boards while Sam tried unsuccessfully to distract him with ranch business. When the doctor finally emerged to announce the birth of a healthy baby boy, Blake nearly knocked the poor man over in his rush to reach Zara's side. She lay exhausted but triumphant, a tiny bundle cradled against her chest. "Meet your son, Mr. Everett." Blake's hands trembled as he touched the downy head. "He's perfect. We'll name him Samuel," Zara decided, "after the man who suggested we marry." Sam, when informed of this honor, removed his hat and stared at his boots for a full minute before mumbling something about dust in the air and wiping suspiciously at his eyes. Young Samuel Everett thrived in the loving environment of Double Circle Ranch. From infancy, he was adored not only by his parents, but by the extended family of ranch hands who vied for the privilege of holding him and later, teaching him the ways of ranch life. On Samuel's first birthday, Blake surprised Zara with a deed adding her name alongside his as legal owner of Double Circle Ranch. "This was always a partnership," he explained as she stared at the document in disbelief. "Now it's official in every way. Blake, I don't know what to say." "Say you'll build this legacy with me, for Samuel, and maybe someday, for brothers or sisters who might join him." She answered with a kiss that conveyed everything words could not. 2 years later, Samuel welcomed a sister Elizabeth Maeve Everett, named for Blake's mother and the boarding house owner who had helped bring her parents together. Blake cut the Double Circle brand into a piece of pine for each child's birth, marking the expansion of their family as permanently as they marked their cattle. Life at Double Circle settled into a rhythm of seasons, cattle drives, births, and growth. The ranch prospered under Blake and Zara's joint management, expanding its holdings and reputation for quality stock. They added modern conveniences as they became available a proper stove, better plumbing, eventually even a telephone line connecting them to Winnemucca. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Blake took Zara back to the creek where he had first proposed. They walked hand in hand along its banks, their children running ahead to search for interesting stones and feathers. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked suddenly, "marrying me the way you did?" Zara stopped, turning to face him with surprise. What brought this on? Just thinking about how it began, with danger and necessity rather than courtship. She touched his face, now bearing more lines but still as dear to her as ever. "Blake Everett, marrying you was the best decision I ever made. Necessity may have hurried us along, but love would have found us eventually." "You're sure of that?" His eyes, still that same stormy gray that had first caught her attention in Pearl's diner, searched hers. "Absolutely certain." She smiled, remembering. "You offered partnership when all I had known was servitude. How could I not fall in love with a man like that? I love you, Zara." He said it simply, as he had thousands of times over the years, yet the words never lost their power. "More today than yesterday, and less than tomorrow. And I love you." She stood on tiptoe to kiss him, still feeling the same thrill after a decade together. "Though I might love you even more if you'd build that swimming hole for the children you've been promising." He laughed, the sound echoing across the creek. "Always the practical one. One of us has to be." They continued their walk, catching up to Samuel and Elizabeth, who were engaged in an intense debate about whether a particularly shiny stone might contain gold. Blake lifted his daughter onto his shoulders while Samuel ran ahead, always exploring, always curious. That night, after the children were asleep, Blake and Zara sat on their porch as they often did, sharing the quiet end of the day. Stars blanketed the Nevada sky, more numerous than the cattle that dotted their expanded pastures. "Do you ever wonder what happened to Holloway?" Blake asked. Zara considered the question. "Sometimes, less and less as the years pass." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "I heard his health was failing. Sheriff mentioned something similar last month, said the ranch is mostly run by managers now. I should feel something about that, I suppose. Satisfaction, maybe," Zara sighed. "But mostly I feel nothing. He has no power over my life anymore." "Hasn't for a very long time." Blake's arm tightened around her. "That's as it should be. What about you? Do you ever regret taking in a desperate runaway that day, putting yourself between her and danger?" "Never." His answer came without hesitation. "Best decision I ever made, bringing you to Double Circle, even with all the complications that followed, especially with those." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "They brought us here. Here to this porch, to this ranch that bore both their names." To the sound of their children breathing peacefully in rooms down the hall. To a partnership that had begun in necessity but had flourished in love. Zara Everett, once trapped in servitude, looked up at the boundless sky and felt nothing but gratitude. For the courage that had driven her to flee. For the kindness of a cowboy who had offered partnership instead of another form of captivity. And for the life they had built together, one choice, one day, one act of love at a time, free at last, in every way that mattered.